Welcome to Crunching Data, where we go behind the scenes with the data leaders who keep it all flowing. We're talking real stories, real challenges, and the future of data from the people building it. This is Crunching Data, a podcast brought to you by Matia, the unified dataOps platform. Let's get into today's episode.
This is Benjamin Segal, co-founder and CEO of Matia. I'm here today with Dylan Anderson. I first came across Dylan via newsletter, The Data Ecosystem. Very recommended if you don't read that. I was super impressed with how authentic and well-researched the content is. So much to the point, we decided that Matia can sponsor some of the content. So Dylan, great working with you. We're not busy writing content for Substack or LinkedIn. Dylan asked head of data strategy for Profusion and held a number of other data roles, which I'll let him go into in a second. Dylan, it's great to have you on the podcast.
Oh, great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
To kick things off, can you tell us a bit about your background and how you found your way into data? It's a pretty interesting, I saw a bit of your history in LinkedIn, and it's pretty interesting to see how you've been in some companies longer and doing consulting and moving down from analyst. So you've been kind of hands-on, and then today in the data strategy space, but wondering how you kind of go into the data space in general.
For sure. So my background really started back in university when I learned to code in R. So I've been in the data space for quite a while, although a bit nascent for a bit, because after university, I went into strategy consulting. And I did a lot of pure strategy consulting for large organizations, thinking about how to improve their profit, how to plan their next 5-year strategy, all these things that organizations think about on a day-to-day basis, not necessarily in the data field. What I saw reoccurring was the need to do more data and analytics. So I did my master's in election analytics, actually, here in London, UK, and went into data strategy consulting. And so now I've been kind of doing that for quite a few years now. And that really is bridging the gap between my technical acumen of coding in R and building models and dashboards and tools with the strategic side of what does a business need and how does it use data to get ahead and actually drive value moving forward. And as you said, I've been in quite a few roles, but I've always been on the consulting side. And that has given me a lot of exposure to how probably dozens of companies do data and what they do with data. And so I get to see their tech stack, but more importantly, I get to see what business questions they solve with data, how they get value from it, how it operates within their organization, and what the output is. And that really helps give me a more holistic perspective of what can we do to make what the data team does more beneficial, more productive, and more impactful. And that's kind of where I focus. And now, as you mentioned, head of data strategy at Profusion, which is a boutique consultancy in London. And I still continue helping organizations figure out what their plan for data is and bridging that gap between data and strategy.
I feel like with the AI and people starting to talk about more data, or at least respect data, those spaces that do not get enough respect of data can shine slowly. At the end, data is everywhere, and you said election. Who thought that election could have? If you do enough data analysis, you might win in an election better than someone else because you have the right team behind you doing the right data analysis. You've been in many. You had many hats across data roles. You did many of those. What moment or specific role, really shaped how you think about data today? Is there a specific one that kind of gave you a better visibility? It could be also specific customers that you met in the role, but wondering what specific one made you look at data differently today.
Yeah, I think as my consulting role has progressed, and I think it was kind of a year or two ago where I worked on a project with a large organization, and I got to kind of pull together all their different data domains and build a strategy around that. But to do that, I had to go into every specific one and learn what that was. And that, I think, I've been doing data strategy for quite a while, but that was the turnaround that really made me understand and think about data as an ecosystem, and that all these different facets and pieces have to work together. And you also have to have a better understanding than just a high level view to understand what, for example, data quality means or data architecture and how they interrelate between another, because there's always dotted lines between these things, but companies don't necessarily treat those as those things. So working with this huge client, it really kind of opened my eyes to that and gave me a lot of incentive to create my newsletter, The Data Ecosystem, and to also approach data strategy from that more holistic perspective. Whereas a lot of data strategy in the past is very business driven or overly technical, and it doesn't quite take that holistic, more technical deep dive into certain areas and how they connect together.
Going into the newspaper or newsletter, your pieces are pretty deeply researched compared to some of the others that I saw. I see a lot of newsletters. Some of them are more like do it yourself, like the DIY or 101, or some examples of results, sometimes with the technical component or not. But I feel like yours specifically, when I'm reading, are very, very research and but still approachable, right? Like you're making those nice diagrams that I guess takes a lot of time. I don't think Midjourney or those tools are making those. So I'm wondering, how do you think about the tone and the audiences?
It's a great question. It's a great question. And I think someone did ask me once, like, who's your target audience for this newsletter? And I said, everybody, because everybody kind of needs to explain. They need that concise and simplistic definition of these different data domains. Right now, I don't think we have that. We have a lot of experts out there, and this is where I get a lot of my research from, who do really well within their vertical and some of the secondary domains to that vertical. So for example, there's a ton of great writers in data engineering, ton of great writers in AI, data governance and quality as well. There's a ton of really good writers, but there's not that kind of through line across them. And also, once you get into the nuts and bolts and the detail of those great writers, you start to get into really specific topics that are just made for data engineers, for example. Therefore, you lose kind of the data leader or like the person who's not as adept at data engineering. So the goal for this newsletter was to kind of reach all those audiences, as well as those who don't necessarily feel comfortable with data in general. So there's those business executives who want to use data but don't necessarily understand it. And I mean, part of my job as a consultant for the past however many years has been making complex things a bit more simple and concise and explaining them better.
Right? It's not that easy, right?
Yeah, it's not easy, and that's why they pay you the big bucks. But so why not do that for kind of data concepts and do that at a more scalable level and relate it to things that people actually care about, like what's the impact of this? Why are you doing this? Because I don't know for how long people have talked about topics like data quality is a really perfect example. People talk about data quality and how it's important, but it's never really resonated with people. And how do you make that happen? And I think we're getting better at it as an industry, but that's kind of what I wanted the newsletter to do, as well as connect it with other different related topics.
I don't know if you thought that the newsletter will get so much traction. It's pretty actually amazing to see the traction and that people have actually read. Like I'm reading some of the comments on LinkedIn, and you do see people going pretty deep and like responding, not just, hey, this is cool. They literally go into and reading and giving comments on the pieces you're sharing, which is not that common from what I saw. So pretty interesting to see. I'm wondering how writing the newsletter changed or impacted your work / the industry, people you're talking with because of the newsletter, etc. The reason I'm asking, because I think it's people usually see the newsletter or see how many followers in general have, and they don't have the access to see what's going behind the scenes. So I'm wondering, how do you feel this impacted actually your work or industry?
Well, one reason why I did it, one reason why I still like it, is that long form writing, that newsletter I do with the newsletter, helps me learn about different industries and different domains within the data ecosystem. And that adds to my repertoire. And it does impact my work as well, because when I do these consulting projects, like a lot of the consulting projects I'm doing on right now, I think 2 right now are actually more data architecture and data modeling and data engineering focused. And I wouldn't feel comfortable with that if I didn't do a lot of newsletter writing on that and learn about it from experts and then kind of seed that into conversations with clients. So it has kind of helped me get that. And I think, to your other point about there being a lot of newsletters out there that might not be read as a lot, I think just AI has created a lot of blah across the data world and across the writing world. And I think it really takes something unique now to stand out. And that's kind of why I took the data ecosystem approach. I think that's a unique idea. And it's also one reason why I do the infographics the way I do, because I think the infographics creates a picture that brings together idea and makes it clear and concise and understandable that writing necessarily doesn't. And trust me, you cannot create those infographics in AI. I've tried, but
It
that's
doesn't work. I'm always saying we're going to save time and we think AI will save us time. And the reality, you get to the point that you want to publish it in a good quality and it just doesn't work. It will maybe one day, but right now it's not working.
Yeah, it definitely helps with my writing for sure. It points me in the right direction and helps me kind of consult the right resources, but it is an aid. It's not the end result. So helping me get to the experts is kind of that first step, and then building on my research and actually spending the time on that is really where the gain is. And I really enjoy doing it. I think writing that long form content is a great way to learn. It's a great way to promote. So yeah.
Amazing. It's amazing to when I'm trying to connect dots back, the famous sentence by Steve Jobs, you can only connect the dot backwards. Like the fact that you did research and masters and then thesis and like your love to writing, I guess, shows. I guess before we go off, the new newsletter topic, what was the most popular post to date? And then why do you think this was most popular? It could be because you just got more followers over time, but I'm wondering if there is some spicy thing or something that made this post, or like not post, I guess, the newsletter article more popular.
Yeah, so the most popular posts, I think there's two that come to mind. One is my first post on a 3-part data product series, and the post is literally, what are data products? And I think people just, that question is always in people's heads. So I think I hopefully explained it well enough to people to make them understand. And in my perspective, a data product is an analytical product. It's an end result, because you're in the end doing data to serve the business stakeholders, and they don't see a data set as a product. They see a dashboard as a product, or AI model as a product. So those must be the products. I don't like the data as a product definition, because I think that's more of it's a raw material that you're using. It's an asset that you're using to build the product. And if you think about products from a business perspective, that's the definition. And I think that, because it's such an unanswered question, is a popular article. The other one is defining a technology strategy and a data technology strategy. It's crazy how many organizations I go in that have strategies galore, marketing, finance, sales, but they don't really have a technology strategy. So they keep buying new tools without even realizing why they're buying new tools. And in the data world, especially now, like there's so many different tools and technologies out there, and a lot of them are really, really good. I've seen a lot of times where a company will buy a tool and then not use it properly and waste it and not get the value that they're spending on it. And a big part of that is not knowing why they're buying it completely and being kind of bested by the salespeople. And so that article really goes through how to think about investing in technology within your organization and how to do it in the right way and strategically.
That's amazing. I'm going to switch a bit gears, more like on the strategy side of things. You're currently head of data strategy. You've been in the strategy space as consultant. I guess, what does strategy look like day to day in your world? It's a very high level. Like, people will define strategy in many, many ways. And I'm wondering, if people look into getting into the space of data strategy, etc., what does data strategy means today? I guess 3 years ago, if I asked you, it would be meaning other things. But today with AI, everyone asking about AI, etc. So wondering, how do you define data strategy? What does data strategy actually look day to day in your world?
Yeah, I think there's two levels to that. So there's the classic term of data strategy, and then there's also thinking about data strategically. So the classic realm of data strategy, I think, if you go to a company and they're talking about a data strategy, it really is about kind of defining what data can do for the organization. And that means kind of coming up with a vision for data, the use cases to support that vision, to deliver against that vision, understanding what is required to deliver those use cases and do those use cases within the organization. So do we need engineers? Do we need data scientists, whatever? And then what's the executional plan to deliver that? And that's kind of a quintessential data strategy. The other side of the coin, which is actually taking up a lot more of my time now, and I'm invested in, goes to the data ecosystem aspect, is data strategically. thinking about data strategically. And I think the data strategy realm needs to expand into this area because, for example, a large engineering project, so say a migration, if it's not thought about strategically, it's going to be 2 years over budget, or sorry, 2 years overblown, twice as much over budget, and not deliver exactly what the organization was planning for. And I've seen that so many times because people just like, okay, this is a technical project, we're going to go into it that way. But I think what we're forgetting is the reason you're doing anything technically. So the reason you're doing data engineering, the reason you're doing data governance, the reason you're doing analytics or science is from a strategic purpose. So there has to be some, even if the smallest sliver of strategy in data projects and data organizations, there has to be some strategic thinking in that, because otherwise you're not going to get the full value of what you're investing to do. And I think that's more and more my day to day, and that's why I get pulled into conversations about engineering, conversations about architecture, or even data security and privacy. It has to be thought of strategically, and I think that's kind of the new role and the new level for data strategy. And I think that's something that people within those domains should clock in and add to their resume as a skill.
Feels like it's not that easy to convince. I guess you're coming kind of like outside to an organization project or looking at projects, and you have the engineering team that just want to go and build, and the other team that just stuck with the sales guy and really want to buy the product, etc. I guess I'm wondering, how do you play, like, it's a lot of buying and like getting to know the people, and you're coming in and out as a data strategy consultant, etc. in some projects. I'm wondering, how hard is it to build this kind of like buying and making sure people, I don't know if it's like you, but like having enough relationship that they listen, and not just like, who is Dylan? Why should I even listen to, even though he has like an amazing newsletter with so many followers, why should I listen to Dylan?
Well, it's funny. Most of my clients don't even know about my newsletter and my LinkedIn stuff. I tell them after a while, but I don't promote it as much as I probably should. But no, you're right. I think when companies really get it and understand it is when they've gone through it before and they failed, or it's been a reoccurring problem for years. So one of my best tools is actually just putting together a quick interview report. So talking to 5 to 10 stakeholders, pulling the themes and being like, hey, this is what everybody's saying. Obviously, you should focus in on this and focus on it in a more strategic way. And everyone's like, yep, I see myself in that. I said that. I agree with that. And that's how they get buy-in. And it goes to the point of like, as data people, and same with data transformation or digital transformation, we're really bad at change management and stakeholder engagement. And if we can do that better, then we can, even if we can do that a little bit better, that is thinking more strategically, and that is approaching projects more strategically. And the engineers that just want to build, at least they'll be building in the right direction and not just be building something that gets replaced in 3 years.
You triggered something in my head when you say change management, because I think people don't understand that data is not, you cannot solve or build something. It's not a POC. You can make a nice POC in one dashboard, but yeah, if the underlying, like, it's more like building a building. If the underlying construction is not there, then you're going to pay dividends later on. And people don't really think about change management enough as they should, I guess, when they invest into those projects, because change management will happen. Like, it is what it is. You cannot change the fact that people will move jobs, right?
Yeah, and change management is not easy, and it's not well defined, and even people who are in that domain don't do it well. So it's tough, and I think that's why people steer away from it, and organizations steer away from it, and there's no tangible result from change management in a lot of things as well. So it makes it's not like you're building anything, you're helping people build it in a more efficient way, but you can't quantify that sometimes. So yeah, I think it's underinvested in and not appreciated enough.
We are getting close to Snowflake and Databricks. We are recording now. I don't know when this is going to go live, but basically, I want to talk with you a bit on data stack, and how do you see, ideal modern data stack today in 2025. It might change 5 years down the road, but it's changing for sure every year or every few years. Wondering, how do you look at that? And then there are some underrated/overrated things that you see today in the ecosystem. People have love for some specific things, or I actually talked with someone that just talking about on-prem and very old tools, and he just got used to those, so he doesn't even understand. I'll give an example. The concept of clone in Snowflake or Iceberg or whatever, like the idea of like having time travel. So he doesn't even sits because he's used to something else. So wondering, how do you see those?
Yeah, I my perspective is I work a lot of clients. Some have literally no data tools. They're still working in Excel and they've got like a on-prem SQL database somewhere in Europe or something like that. And but I mean, they are missing out on a lot of things. Do they need tools to get to that next stage? Not necessarily. Could tools help them on some of these things? Definitely. So I think it goes back to when I was talking about the technology strategy piece and article. What are you using those tools for, and what do you need? And I think we are really focused on what's the best tool for the data stack, what's the best tool here and there. But I think in the end, it's like, what's the tool that makes the most sense for your organization, and what you're doing. Kind of like I'll take Matia as an example, and data quality as an example. I see data quality increasing quite a bit. Data observability hit kind of a hot point a year ago and is still growing in that way. And I think that tool for observability and the other platform components is really helpful for a lot of organizations. I think it's how they fit it in, though. And a lot of organizations have been doing these quality things manually for so long, they don't really understand how to fit it in. So that's the disconnect, right? And so as long as I think there's the use cases for these tools, but an organization needs to understand how to implement it. And then I think there are some overrated tools as well. I'm not going to potentially go into them and discredit some organizations, but I think tools become overrated when they're too niche and they're not well implemented in, or that they're sold too readily and it's not well understood by the teams on how to use them. An example, actually, I can give on an overrated tool I see a ton is Salesforce. I think Salesforce is great at what it does, at kind of what it offers. But I think a lot of organizations don't know how to use and get the data capabilities and the data from Salesforce in a way that is helpful for them. So it's not that Salesforce isn't the right tool. It's just that it's overrated on the right in front of you level. And once you get behind it, then you can get a lot more value. But you need to know how to get to that value. And I think that's the biggest thing with tooling is what is the behind the first level? What's the second level of that tool or the third level? Or how do you get the actual value of that? And how do you ingrain that into your organization? Because once you do that, Salesforce data is amazing. And the platform data that Salesforce collects its data is great as well. But you just need to get to that data. And that can be a difficult task.
It's pretty interesting. I did not see yet. Maybe it's a great topic for an article about what you mentioned is a technology strategy. I think, like, if you go and buy a new tool or if you implement a new tool, what are the checkbox that you need to do in order to make sure that the buying and the people are there before buying? Like, let's say you sign a contract tomorrow. There is a whole process of like understanding the criteria of what you want to get out of it, who's going to be involved, et cetera, which I think many times people just skip. So you're bringing me back to what you said before on technology strategy. I guess going into that, there are a lot of early stage companies, like 100, 200, 300 people companies, 2, 3, 4 years in, that are looking into making their data better. I guess they have sometimes pressure from investors, etc. They went too fast and they did not invest in data necessarily. I'm wondering, what do you think is like the right time for those type of companies to build more formal data platform, or like making sure that the data is having an infrastructure behind it and not everything is kind of like ad hoc?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to figure out the strategy and why you're using data in the first place as an organization and what it needs to solve. Once you kind of figure out those use cases, and it doesn't have to take a lot of time. Like, you can do a couple workshops and figure that out, or hire someone externally and then they'll do it in a month. Once you figure that out, then you can kind of figure out, okay, what do we need to support that from a platform perspective? And I think a lot of companies go Snowflake and Databricks and buy their software and use their tools because they're big names they don't actually need that necessarily. They can do what they're doing with smaller tools and more efficiently spent and more efficient spend. So it really depends on the use case. Find the use case and then find the tooling for it. And I think what you'll also find is like not just the tooling to service the use case, but the tooling to support the fundamentals and foundation, right? You do need that platform. So what is that platform stuff? Do you need to verify the quality of the data? So is there an observability in there or catalog or something? Is there a way to make the engineering better, for example, like pipeline testing or whatever? So what kind of tooling do you need to support the use case, both from it can help us do ML and stuff, but also from it makes the data clean and usable.
You were talking a lot about governance and observability and data quality in the past newsletter that I read. And I have one big question that I think comes to mind always when we talk about governance. So, like adding layers of security governance and many other tools. I guess, how do you think about balancing the speed, like fast-paced environment and governance? It always comes in some cost, right? We're getting more governance or data quality or observability. Even like, in the engineering space, when you add tests to the code base, you need to build systems that can run those tests fast enough so it doesn't slow CI/CD or whatsoever. So wondering, how do you think about balancing the governance and the fast-paced environments?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge proponent of like having a potential sandbox to run things or external containers to the main platform where you can actually test some of these things and do some of that stuff locked away and with access control, obviously. I think the other thing about governance is a broad word. I view data governance less from a risk perspective, less from a security perspective, more from a how do we make the data accessible to be used by the business and who owns that data to actually make it used. And part of that is the risk and security, which is very much evidenced today because there's so many companies, especially in the UK right now, that have been hacked recently and have lost millions and millions of pounds and dollars because they've been hacked. So it just shows that risk, security, and access management is super important, which is often not invested in. But also, like, how do you still build, to your point, with that risk and with those security levels and that access management? And that's one reason why I think it's really important to kind of have both the operational side of things and the analytical side of things, and be able to kind of govern it in different ways and really look at how the data is being used, what it needs to be used for, and then make the assessment about the risk controls and the governance that you put on top of it. Only then can you really get the most optimal way. Because I think, and this is my assumption, most people forget that governance isn't about locking data away or keeping it from being used or reducing risk. It's about making risk management as efficient as possible so the business can take advantage of the data that it has without it being held ransom on the dark web for 20 billion Bitcoin or something.
I feel like risk is always there. It never goes away. You've
Especially
seen a lot
today.
it's just growing, right? Like you connect some MCP and boom, the risk is there. But I'm wondering, you've seen a lot of data teams, not one, not two. I believe way more than that. I guess, what makes a great data team in your eyes? Like you've seen them, you've seen bad ones, you've seen good ones. Maybe you help bad ones to become better ones. But I'm wondering, how do you, like when you see a good one, so what is like a shiny thing that you would say for a head of data in companies to go and search for?
Yeah, so I think that the two biggest things for data teams in my view, for success is one is a really good organizational structure and operating model. Something that, for example, supports the business, enables the business, doesn't just sit into one side of the business, but sits like kind of more horizontal and supports the businesses that it needs to do and works efficiently with them to enable them and deliver value rather than sitting under IT and just doing tickets one after the other. Because those data teams often aren't fun places to work, one, and two, don't get the recognition they deserve, and three, don't ever deliver against the goals that the organization has for them. So that's one really big thing for a successful data team. The second one, I think, is kind of a combination of two. It's second and third, I guess, but it's a really good leader who promotes and really creates direction. She or he really needs to kind of see the vision of what the data team is doing and connect well with other business stakeholders. And at the same time, and this floats into three, is able to teach and hand over and make others learn and drive towards that common cause and challenge. And I think that pathway to success, the pathway to challenging people within the data team to grow, to become more than just technical robots, that is another part of it. And that kind of fits under the data leader's purview, but also stands alone. So that's why I'm saying the 2 and 3 And I think that's one of the biggest problems when you get into the data field is you get people who are in and out after 2 years, or who stay at a place and don't advance for 15 years, because there really isn't that defined ladder, that defined progression. And a lot of managers in data teams don't really know how to manage or grow their employees the way they should, because they grew up as technical people and didn't learn the people and soft skills and able to do that.
Gonna move a bit to AI. We don't have much time, but like want to make sure we cover a bit of things on AI. I have 1 or 2 questions there. I'm wondering, how are you seeing AI actually showing up like in your day-to-day workflow? In the newsletter, for sure, you covered a bit of that, but I'm wondering, how do you see AI coming in a workflow of customers in the data space? Yep, wondering about that.
Yeah, I think the workflow for my newsletter, it just helps me research better and helps me do things in a more efficient way. I think that's also where I start to see it with some of my clients and customers, is they are being a bit more efficient using AI tools. I don't see that much AI being built internally for a lot of these organizations. Like, they're using things like Copilot and like Claude and ChatGPT to help them research and stuff. The internal tools that companies are building, I think, are usually one-offs, and they are few and far between. And I've seen a lot of AI teams emerge in 2023, 2024 and fall apart a year later because they haven't delivered anything of value. And not to say that it won't be a huge part, but I think there's still a lot of growth and room for companies to do more simplistic machine learning models and data models and BI, and then add on the AI component. But I am starting to see the AI tooling to kind of make its way in from a support perspective or enabling perspective. Though I think what you read on LinkedIn and on the internet is a bit overblown, and it's a bit idealistic in a way.
Yeah, I see it a bit less in data. We are constantly thinking about that, and I think one of the things that make it harder in data versus engineering, etc., is that you need then deterministic answers. Like, you cannot have asking something 2 times the same question over time and getting different results, especially in complex modeling. And many times I see like you go back and the modeling is not correct. So you cannot expect the AI to do well if the underlying layer is not set up properly, which bring us back to observability, data quality, etc., etc. I guess within that, from what you saw, what are you most excited about or skeptical of in the whole AI tooling landscape? I know there are not tons in the data space, but wondering if you saw things that you're skeptical about, like promising things and then they did not work, or things that you're super excited about.
I'm skeptical about AI being able to replace people. I think companies going towards that angle are doing it wrong, and they don't quite know how they're doing it. I mean, Klarna is a perfect example, and they were so over the moon about how they replaced 700 employees, and now they are reporting like major losses in the past while, and they're bringing back people. So I think I'm very skeptical of that. I'm very optimistic and excited about the fact that AI embedded in a lot of these tools that already exist is helping get rid of low-level tasks. Referencing observability here, but like, humans shouldn't be the one manually looking through some of these anomalies, and it should be able to recognize and understand where the anomalies happen specific to the company's data sets, especially if it's learning from that. Like, that's not an impossible thing, but it's so useful. I mean, anyone would find it useful. So I'm really optimistic about AI kind of making a lot of the data foundations a lot easier and better for these organizations who want to do more building cool value add models on top of it. AI will actually help them do that better. It'll help them build AI before they actually build it.
I agree. I guess before we sign off, what is your most controversial data opinion?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess it's controversial. I've never really publicly said it, but I think you shouldn't hire data scientists for quite a while, because I think data analysts can actually do a lot of what people want data scientists to do, or data engineers. So I think a data scientist should be like a 15th hire or a 20th person hire. Yeah, that's a controversial opinion, I guess.
Do you see many times that people do it wrong, aka like they would hire a data scientist like the third, second, fourth, whatever, way faster than the 15, let's say?
Yeah, I see that all the time. And the data scientist ends up cleaning data and building a Power BI dashboard. And you're like, that's not their job, and then they leave a year
They
later.
get
They have,
frustrated.
a data scientist, they have a specific role. They have a really good skill set, but it's like hiring someone that's super expensive for a lower, like a lower paying job kind of thing. You need to kind of make the right pick and when you hire them.
This last question on my end. If you were not doing anything data related, what would be a dream job for you?
Yeah, I asked this a while
Don't say
ago.
election. Don't say election. Nothing in the election.
No. I had two answers, so I'm gonna say two answers. One is I love a mathematician. I really like math. It would have been cool to go into that domain and really rock that. The other one would be an NFL, American football coach. I love the strategy involved in the NFL and the American football. I've never played at all because I didn't grow up in the U.S. But I mean, I take my Madden skills and apply it to the day-to-day scoping and strategy of the skills. So those are my two other dream careers that will never take place.
That's interesting ones. Thank you for joining. It's amazing to see you in person via kind of like a recording, but looking forward to seeing you either in London or in the US anytime soon.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it, and a lot of fun.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Crunching Data, brought to you by Matia, the unified dataOps platform. You can find us at matia.io.